What you want more than anything is you want to meet people with different experiences. And I've always sort of found you would see things that you would not automatically have come across.
Hello and welcome to the Parliamentary Review podcast, the podcast that listens to leadership. I'm Jonathan White, and in each episode I'm joined by directors, CEOs, CFOs, government ministers, chairmen, presidents, maybe one day even the Catalan president. That is if the Spanish stop arresting him. The aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We discuss everything from why European markets are slumping because of trade nerves to new British manufacturers of preserves, and of course the innovation and success in the country that make it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current political and economic state of the country. Later on in this episode, you'll have the chance to hear our exclusive interview with Lord Pickles, former Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Chairman of the Conservative Party, and of course current co-chairman of the Parliamentary Review. But for now, we're joined by Kev Crisp, the owner of Crisp Vocational Provision. CVP is an alternative provision centre based in Nottingham that offers opportunities to students from across the East Midlands who, for whatever reason, are struggling to access or engage in a mainstream school. Kev founded the service in 2013 after working in mainstream settings for the previous 6 years and realised that what he had to offer could have a much wider reach in a different setting. CVP was born, and they have gone from strength to strength, enriching hundreds of young people's lives. We will find out more now. Kev, welcome.
Hi, you're right there.
Yep, thanks very much for coming on today. I know it's no doubt a busy term. It's been a few months since Crisp Vocational Provision has been in the review. I thought perhaps, Kev, it might be a good idea to start with letting listeners know what you and the team have been up to since.
Okay, so since we last spoke, we've had an expansion, physical expansion on the actual building. We've put a new upstairs workspace in, consisting of classrooms, an ICT suite. We've also started preparation. One of the reasons behind the expansion was to prepare us for an application to become an independent school. And also we've got a new GCSE pathway in place where we're delivering maths and English, and that's on a daily basis. So yeah, we've been busy.
A bit of an understatement, I think. And we'll certainly talk about a bit of that in a bit more detail later. But now, Kev, I thought it might be a fine place, though, to start with letting everyone know that obviously your background. You've been working over the years in pupil referral units, other mainstream settings for a number of years. What first inspired you, though, to start CVP in the first place?
I've got to be honest, I was working in a mainstream school. I didn't particularly enjoy it. And that's no reflection on the school or anything like that. I just felt I couldn't be myself. I had, rightfully so, I had responsibilities that I had to do as a class teacher, and kind of getting to know the students, getting to know, how to make them achieve and all that sort of stuff would kind of became second place to actually like the results that was expected of me. So I didn't really enjoy the mainstream setting, so I thought I'd have a look at having previously set up similar projects, councils and that sort of stuff. I thought I could have a look at setting up on my own and seeing how that went.
And that was 6 years ago now, and it's gone from strength to strength.
Yes.
I think what might be key, and perhaps I think it's a lot of something a lot of people might not think about in the first instance, but when you do start something like this up just by yourself, to develop that project, it's so important to have a well-rounded and reliable team, especially in being able to relate and work with the kids you do. How important is having a team like that, and how long did it take to develop it properly?
The team, they are what's made us what we are. So over the years, I've made some really good appointments, and some of them are still with us. Unfortunately, it's really hard to find the right person. On paper, you can talk about it. Until they come in and experience, they can't see what it's like. You can't get an understanding for what our day may look like, what can present itself, how it can change in an instant. So actually, to get some really good staff members and retain them is really, really, like I say, that is a priority for me. Without our team, there wouldn't be a Crisp Vocational Provision. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know if your pupils, and perhaps more than others, having a familiar team for them and having a structured day with direction must be key, delivering good results and working with them. How are you able to provide that sort of structure for them, and what do you find that works best?
So we've got a structured day. Every student has got a timetable, and they respond really well to that. When things change, if there's some staff absence or anything, and you have to kind of go to a plan B where they're not in the particular group, and that you can see the students don't like it. They like that structure. They embrace it. And it works really well. What our day would look like is you might have a student have to do 50 minutes construction, like plumbing or electrics, 50 minutes motor vehicle mechanics with a new teacher or staff member in front of them, so a different phase, and 50 minutes BTEC sport. So they've got a lot of variety going on within their timetable, but they've also got a different phase in front of them. So it's fresh for them throughout the day, and I think that works really, really well. But also with regards, the staff member in front of them, because we're intentionally a small provision, we know what's going on in the students' lives, from going to the football at the weekend or maybe going to visit dad or whatever.
Excellent.
So we've got that where we can speak to we chat to them when they arrive in the morning. We might have breakfast with them. We can get a feel for how their day is. Show that we're interested in them away from the qualifications, and they really like that. We've had ex-students come back when they've passed the driving test. We're the first people to go and see them. So it's really, really
fantastic. And I suppose, as you've certainly made clear, that key to success is taking the time to get to know them personally. And just so listeners are aware, obviously the students you work with range from everything from perhaps just playing truant to being on the wrong side of the law in slightly more serious ways. So that one-on-one aspect is so important, and as you grow, no doubt that'll be something you'll keep at the forefront of your mind in being able to keep the group sizes small.
Yeah, no, I will never change the small group sizes because I think we will lose what makes us successful if we suddenly, you've got staff members with maybe 10, 15 students in front of them, you're going to lose that personal touch. We're going to get negative behaviour, and the students aren't going to achieve. One thing we do, which is really motivational for the students, we claim as their qualifications as they achieve them. So you may have a student who's a bit disengaged, and he's in a group with a student who's really engaged, and every half term the other students getting certificates. They want to be part of that, and that works really well for us. If it was bigger, with bigger class sizes, I think we'd lose a lot of the good work that we do. We also have a key worker system in place as well, where every staff member, generally, if they've got a good relation with relationship with one of the students, they become their key worker, and we have a minimum of half-termly meetings, sit down, how's your week been, how's this going on, and the students respond well, knowing that we're taking the time to, ask them. We do that daily, in the mornings, break times, that sort of stuff. But it gives them a formal setting to sit down and discuss what's working for them and what's not so well.
Fantastic.
And generally, they respond really well to that.
And often for so many, it might be a case of them having very few other outlets like that in perhaps their lives to be able to do that. So the importance of that, I think, both on a not just an educational level, but indeed at an emotional level, is so important. And I know you've already brought it up, Kev, with further expansion planned, new qualifications being offered, etc. A very exciting time, but also, of course, brings its own new challenges. Looking to the future, how do you see, first of all, the medium-term challenges for CVP, but also for the sector more broadly?
The challenges facing ourselves will be the application for the process to become an independent school. So, I'm a tradesman by background, and suddenly, Ofsted are going to be a big part of our, what we do, which we've got nothing to hide. We open doors for all our schools, come by any time, and we have regular compliance. But that's going to be a nervous time for everyone involved.
Without a doubt.
Everyone thinks of Ofsted, and but it's we realise that they'll be working with us with that application and supporting us. So that's with regards ourselves. Generally within the education sector, it's who knows what's going to happen next. And I think we've just got to try and keep on top of what we're doing, and hopefully we'll all be all right.
I think you could speak for the nation, Kev, when you say goodness knows what's going to happen next. I think anyone does, but of course we are speaking in the midst of a general election, so that's ruined everybody's Christmas. But what might be interesting then, instead of asking what do you think will happen, is what do you hope will happen? The party manifestos will be rolling out pretty soon, and what is it you'd hope to see when it comes to education provision, especially in terms of how you provide it from the two main parties?
Whatever happens, no doubt you could speak to any sector or anyone who works for any sector, and they will say the same. I just hope with whatever happens, it doesn't impact on the students.
Yes.
I hope that there's not going to be cuts to education. Because the students need that, like the young people need that, obviously, and anything negative impacting there, obviously, likelihood is it'll impact on the whole country in the long term. But also, we've seen some of the students, or virtually all our students, have got safeguarding going on. And I can see the really good job that social services and other teams offer many of our learners and their families. And I'm just I'm hoping that they're not impacted by cuts as well, because we see daily the fantastic work that they do, like I say, with our learners and our families, and that is a worry of mine.
Here, I don't think you'll find anyone that could possibly disagree with you there. Kevin, will cross all our fingers and hope for the best there. And I think it will be. And obviously, because so many of your learners, your students can come from more vulnerable backgrounds. How would you say sometimes young people overall do get a bad rap, especially from the press, you work with them every day. You work with them in sometimes trying circumstances. How would you, assuming you will, how would you defend them against some of those more outrageous allegations? I assume you see them working hard and doing their best.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do get a negative press, but we take we like to offer our students experiences that realistically they probably wouldn't experience it if they wasn't with us, such as like we've got a snowboarding program. We take students out to, only the last half term we took some students out to see the Knife Angel when it was in Derby, which is quite local to us.
Excellent.
We took students camping. We take them out to play golf as part of the year, all that sort of stuff. What I would say is if we didn't trust them, we wouldn't take them out. And when we have taken out the students, we've only ever had one occasion where one of them has let them down. So out of probably 20, 30 trips, taking up to 10 students at a time, that's not bad going at all. One thing we do instill into the students is using the manners and that sort of stuff. And when they go on their lunch breaks to go and get food and all that sort of stuff, we'll always get praise on their manners.
Superb. So, and what is it you would say, and you say to, no doubt, your learners every day, the qualifications they're working towards are not an end in themselves, but can be the springboard to their highest ambitions. What is it you say, because obviously you work with kids from sort of, is it 12 to 16? What do you say to them at that age as to what their limitations or lack thereof are?
I mean, from our backgrounds, what I think is really good for the students to do is to experience different skill sets. So say, for example, when I left school, I had in my head I wanted to be a mechanic, and it's what I wanted to do, what I wanted to do. When I then left school and became a mechanic, I hated it, and I wanted to leave straight away. But in those days, the intake was in September, so I was stuck for a year doing mechanics. So these learners have got the opportunity. They can try electrics, they can try the plumbing, they can do the brickwork, they can do mechanics, they can do the auto electrician side. So I think what's really important for them is that they've got opportunities to try all these new skills to help them make an informed decision. But also they do understand the value of it. One thing we promote about when it comes to portfolio work and that sort of stuff, this is an opportunity for you to sell yourself to potential employers, to train, training providers, apprenticeships. So, treat it as, an exam document and all that. So the students have got from the off, they realise the importance of these qualifications, not just the qualifications, but everything going on around them. Now, our progression routes, we didn't have one student that was NEET last year, so we had 100% progression routes. This year we're getting a lot more focus around work experience and that sort of stuff. But no, they do value it and they do get it. And, what we say to learners is, particularly in the mechanics, where they're doing the level 1 qualification, if they do that, they get maths and English, they can go straight onto a level 2 qualification when they leave our provision. So they do respond well to it, and they realise that, it is valued. They're not just here playing at these things, that the qualifications are valued. And
Quite right. And conscious of the time, actually, here, Kev, I know we could probably talk about this for hours, but we probably shouldn't. I think perhaps if we can end with, you obviously this has been, as you look forward to a pretty exciting future for yourselves and your learners, and as you expand, what do you think are the key lessons you've learned over the last 6 years or so? And, there were ups and downs, no doubt, along the way, but what is it that you always keep with you as a guiding principle moving forward?
I think the main thing for myself, what I really learned, was, and I learned the hard way. Don't try and do everything yourself.
Yep.
So there's experts in the field. So there's, we buy in, HR consultancy, safeguarding resources, all that sort of stuff. Basically get professional help really was the main one for me, and I buy in the services that we need because it just eases the pressure on a daily basis from you rather than trying to juggle another job, so to speak. So that's one. And another thing that I stick by is the small group sizes for our learners. I don't think anything else would work for them. I don't think they'd achieve, and I don't think they'd see particularly good behaviour. I think those are the main points. And lastly, obviously, if you've got a good team together, keep it together, because without that team, the learners, definitely wouldn't learn.
Absolutely. Well, we're heading very much now the final term towards Christmas. I hope it's not too much of a stressful one, Kevin. Hopefully we can speak again later on in the academic year, because you've got a lot ahead of you for you and the MCVP, and it'll be exciting to hear about it. Thank you very much for joining us, Kev.
Thank you very much for your time.
I hope you all enjoyed our chat with Kev, and especially learning more about the challenges facing the sector and how the whole team at Crisp Vocational Provision are continuing to raise standards. If you haven't heard it before, coming up now is our conversation with the Parliamentary Review's co-chairman, Eric Pickles. Lord Pickles served as Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government in David Cameron's cabinet before receiving a peerage in 2018. Lord Pickles remains active as the United Kingdom's anti-corruption champion and the country's special envoy for post-Holocaust issues, as well as being a keen vexillologist. That's flags to you and me. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking to Eric. Here it is now. Eric, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Now, I'm sure you won't mind me reminding the listeners that you've been involved in politics, both local and national, for quite a number of decades. Indeed, before the days we were in the common market. Given your experience over those years, what thoughts have you had over the last few weeks and months about the current political situation the country finds itself in?
Situation is quite dire because we have a parliament that is by and large useless. It's like a bored teenager on a long drive, and it knows what it doesn't want, and it's so bored with Brexit, but it can't agree. So no matter what you put up, it's against it. Are you in favour of a referendum? No, I don't want that. Are you in favour of remaining within the single market? No, I don't want that. Are you in favour of... No, I don't want to do that. No. And are you in favour of leaving without a deal? No, we don't want to do that. So it's against everything, but there isn't enough votes to be in favour of something. And it could be by the time this podcast goes out that Boris has started on the process of the bill, because we'll be voting on that today. But even then, what people don't seem to understand, this is not the end of Brexit.
Right.
This is barely opening the door of Brexit. We've got years of negotiations about trade agreements, relationships with Europe, putting down pieces of legislation. We get our agriculture, our fisheries, our financial services into place. Brexit is going to go on and on and on and on. I'm sure we are.
Now, the question is, I should actually remind listeners that we are talking on the day that the second reading of the European Withdrawal Act will take place. So, as we speak, we don't quite know. As, well, perhaps like the government front bench, don't know what's going to happen. You compare Parliament to a petulant teenager. What do you do to a petulant teenager to sort it out? Is there a chance that it will see sense and push this through this bill without making amendments? Is there a chance it will vote for its own for a general election? How do you see this playing out at the moment?
the sensible thing would be to put this deal through, because I've always been of the view a deal is better than no deal, because this is just the beginning. In order to start the process of Brexit, start the process of the United Kingdom taking over powers that it's not really exercised for 40-odd years, the smart thing is to get this thing through now. But in a way, it's not about Brexit itself. If there was a free vote, this deal would have gone through. Mrs May's deal would have gone through. But it's about politics. It's about a Labour Party that thinks it has a chance, trying to make the Prime Minister, whether it was Theresa May or Boris Johnson, look as though that they are in office but not in power, of delaying as long as possible. There's a lot of talk about an election in the autumn, maybe back end of November, beginning of December. Something for us to look forward to before Christmas. It's beginning to look less likely. It's beginning to look as though they might want to drag it into spring to get as far away as possible from the rather decisive moment that Boris came back with a deal. We have to remind ourselves that nobody thought he could deliver a deal, and it does quite shock them. And if you remember, all this process went through in order to ensure that we were left without a deel. When we have a deal, suddenly, oh no, it's not that kind of deal. We don't want that kind of deal. We want something different.
I think the vast majority of people in this country, whether Remain or Leave, now would be very satisfied for this to come to a amiable conclusion. And as correctly just said, because when it does come to those in the opposition who claim to want this to end, and then introduce wrecking amendments that introduce new objections to it, the general public are getting quite frustrated.
But you've got to understand that quite a lot of people don't get beyond a small area within Westminster, sometimes cliche referred to as the Westminster bubble, and go back to their own patch. Now, by and large, everybody hates their MP, except when they're at home, doing the fairs, wandering around, helping people. So they, in a way, they're cosseted to that great, which I feel is coming as a tsunami of change.
You were, of course, MP for Brentwood for
25 years.
Absolutely. What would you? I mean, of course, you resident there as well, despite being a proud Yorkshireman, obviously representing a good Essex seat. What would you say to your constituents right now? Hang in there; it'll be all right.
Well, it's different when you're a member of Parliament, because you've got to kind of toe the government line a little bit. So one thing I found now is I've got my weekend back and I say what I want, and I think I always say to our constituents is that it is pretty hopeless down there.
Excellent. Well, on that, I think, honest assessment, it's something I think the Parliamentary Review has always done quite well, talking frankly about problems, issues, and also not just good practice, but leadership. Well,
I was used to read it when I was a member of Parliament, because, what you want more than anything is you want to meet people with different experiences, and I've always sort of found it quite a kind of a chatty magazine, but also you would see things that you would not automatically have come across. I certainly have attended the receptions over the year, and it's amazing the things you kind of pick up.
And I think it's important to stress it's not because politicians are uninterested, because honestly, as you'll know more than anyone, it's an issue of time. And to be able to have a channel and a platform where you can keep communication lines between businesses, schools and policymakers is so exceptionally important.
I think so, and it's important that it's beholden to nobody. People, pay to be part of the publication, pay people to be members, and it's a way of not beholden to government, not beholden to anything.
Now, you're echoing the words, of course, your fellow Chairman Lord Blunkett has said. What some might not know is that you started your political journey perhaps even further left than David Plunkett.
Absolutely, I was a communist.
Now, what was it?
At the age of 14, I was bought the Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution, and I read it from cover to cover. I tried to read it a few years back, and I just couldn't follow anything.
Oh, so I was going to say perhaps you might know the minds of the show front bench better than they do themselves.
From my position when I first joined, I would regard them as recalcitrant running dogs of the capitalist system.
Now, what was it that moved you from radical Marxists to running the only inner city council controlled by the Conservatives in the 80s?
Well, I was very young, and I was fascinated by what was happening in what was then Czechoslovakia and Dubček, and the revolution that was taking place there inside communism, and the way in which he was repressed by Mr. Brezhnev, and the tanks and taking over. I was so angry. And I'm 16, remember. I'm really angry. And I thought, what's the most outrageous thing I can do? I'll join the Conservative Party as a protest. And I kind of sticked around, and my family thought it was the funniest thing that ever happened to us. I was Eric the Tory. And
I think you announced this quite grandly as a grand protest.
I did indeed, but I kept going down, and it was an exciting time. People were developing the ideas of what the Conservative Party should be. Selsdon man, even Heath looked radical. We had different ideas, and it eventually clicked. And at some point, I became a Conservative, and that was 51 years ago. I think I'm definitely 100% a Tory now.
Through and through.
Through and through.
Although I do know the story. Most people might guess that a dynamo Conservative like yourself would have perhaps a portrait of Mr. Thatcher or Mr. Churchill in their office. But who is it that you have?
I'd Che Guevara. Which I always had him over my left shoulder of visitors, and they always used to you see their eyes going up and thinking, who, I can't possibly be it. Someone asked me if it was Desi Arnaz. I thought it was married to Lucille Ball. But no, the reason I did that was to remind me and to remind my officials that without constant vigilance, the cigar-chomping commies would take over.
I'm sure David Bunk was in the room to reply to that, actually. But in that long journey, you eventually ended up, of course, in 2010, doing something most Conservatives had never thought they would have to do, but in a coalition government with, of all people, the Liberal Democrats.
That's right.
Now, something I think perhaps today more than ever, people and our politics seems to be almost wholly determined on how we voted in a referendum 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the most normal thing would happen after something like that would be the country would come together, and if anything, we're more divided. I mean, I thought working in the coalition, I'm proud to have been part of that coalition. I'm proud to have worked alongside the Liberal Democrats, who I think realise that, like all minority partners in a coalition, they would suffer at the polls.
Do you think we've lost the ability recently as a people to work with those that we might disagree with on issues more than we used to?
I'm not sure that's right. I mean, you can see various members of the Conservative Party working closely with Liberal Democrats and Labour to defeat their own government, but it's not a thing I think I would want to encourage.
Quite. And I should remind listeners, we are recording this in Victoria, just over the road at Cardinal Place, a fantastic new development site which wouldn't have been there without some of your legislation. What was the proudest?
I personally approved it.
Absolutely. What was the proudest moment, do you think, in serving Secretary for 5 years?
It's my actual proudest moment. We did a thing called Troubled Families, which was the first centre-right attempt to deal with poverty and to deal with difficult families that were causing a disproportionately large amount of call upon the on the state, and it was on the basis of tough love. It's on the basis of getting people into jobs. It's about dealing with the kind of the family as a whole, not just one or two individuals that were having a problem. And I'm pleased that it's continued.
And since, I should very much stress that since, of course, you're stepped down to being an MP, you do have your weekends back, but that's not to say you haven't remained very active and very busy. Of course, continued as the government's anti-corruption champion, shone the harsh light of day over malpractice in the local government. Indeed, the Queen's speech we've just had includes some of your recommendations from 2016. I think a couple of things on that. First of all, are you surprised, I may imagine you may not be, at some of the backlash towards, in this country, introducing voter ID for voting?
It is absurd, and it's particularly absurd coming from the Labour Party, because it was largely Labour's vulnerability that got my interest in trying to do something about it. And it's a bit like saying, you're requiring people to show some ID, that this is suppressing voting. It's a bit like saying the post office is suppressing parcels because they demand to see some ID. I think they've got a bee into their bonnet that this is something like that goes in the state to repress it. It's not. It's about giving confidence to the system. Now, the Electoral Commission and foreign observers have warned us for such a long time that our electoral system is vulnerable. And it's to misquote John Major, we are really sort of old males cycling to evensong and Warburn. Yeah, I mean, it's such a basic thing. It's an important thing. And it was kind of interesting in some of the trials. They did a focus group with a bunch of young Asian girls. And they said they thought the process of a photo ID would actually give them a greater confidence in the fairness of the system. I make all kinds of recommendations to stop postal vote harvesting, to stop various fraud taking place, to stop intimidation at counts, to stop intimidation outside polling stations.
And I think you referenced it earlier, the Westminster bubble. A lot of the places where this occurs and the places where this does go on are places where perhaps many members, many people in the press don't usually go to.
No, they don't. We saw a YouGov poll that said the overwhelming majority, well in the 60%, thought this idea was sensible.
Yeah, and I imagine you're quite proud that recommendation is in the speech.
Yes, I mean, I'm a bit frustrated they didn't do it sooner, but nevertheless, I'm very happy that they are doing it.
It's as if the government's time has been taken up by something else and we've not focused on anything domestic.
Absolutely.
But with a man, though, with his roots in local government, do you think, and how much you've worked with that report, especially looking at them carefully, how would you rate our current state of local municipal politics?
Local government's very good. I mean, local government, don't get me wrong, it's by and large corruption-free, and it does a remarkably good job. And it was, in truth, my worries about local government and that these measures were brought in. I don't believe the fraud is big enough to be able to take a parliamentary seat, but it is big enough to take a council. And if you are negligent, uncaring about the probity of the poll, you're likely to be equally negligent about the awarding of contracts to your friends. So it's all past that. But local government is a very enduring part of our constitution. I got a bit stick because we had to take some money from them, but by and large they survive very well.
Excellent. Now, beyond obviously that work, you're also, of course, the British envoy for post-Holocaust issues.
Yeah, sure.
I think it very dear to your heart. I know you've done some fantastic work recently, including with obviously former Shadow Chancellor from the Review, Ed Balls. Would you mind, if you could just let the listeners know what projects you are working with and really the importance that has to so many communities around the country?
Well, I used to be very unpleasant about Ed Ball, and he used to be very unpleasant about me. But I found working with him remarkably easy, and we've not had a single row in 2 years, and by now we're beginning to be able to finish each other's sentences. We're building a memorial to the Holocaust next to Parliament, with a learning centre below it. And the reason why the Prime Minister chose that site is that it was David Cameron, and he wanted to ensure that when people left the memorial, they would look and see Parliament and recognise that it was the last bastion against tyranny. But more important, to remind people who work in Parliament that the legislature has a choice. It can either protect its citizens or it can oppress its citizens. And we do know that it was a compliant legislature that brought in the Nuremberg laws. And at a time when there are parts of Europe that are seeking to rewrite their history and seeking to see themselves as only the victims of the Nazis, I'm determined that we should tell the truth in an unblinking way. We are, I suppose, at a critical crossroads when the last survivor is likely to be no longer with us within the next decade and a half. And at that point, we do know that history starts to be reassessed. I think it was Simon Sharma that talked about this. And he was referring to the French Revolution. And of course, most of the books written in the 1850s are the ones that have shaped our view of the French Revolution. But the difference is this, that slightly over 100 years ago, my grandfather Edgar grabbed hold of his Lee Enfield and walked out of a trench in the Somme and walked towards the Germans. And within a few minutes, most of the people he'd been brought up with, most of his friends were dead. Nobody doubts that he did that. But there's a whole industry out there that doubts that the Holocaust took place. So that's why it's important that we help frame that narrative.
And you reference as well, it's so important, especially at this time of history, after 7 years afterwards, that young people in schools get the correct education about it. How do we compare as a country in doing that compared to some of our European friends?
We I think, compare remarkably well, particularly because we've got a mixture of things. We ensure through the lessons of Auschwitz that 2 pupils from every secondary school go to Auschwitz each year, that they have a preliminary meeting, a visit and a wrap-up. We ensure that Holocaust Day is remembered in January. Now, I can remember starting that, or I'm not starting it, but being part of a foot soldier of people that put it together. And, it was like one man and a dog, but now it's quite a massive, it's a massive event. So I think we are quite good at remembering that. I think where we perhaps do need to have a wider understanding is beyond the death counts. And we need to kind of understand the Einsatzgruppen, which was the roving murder squads, how important they were. You were more likely to have been shot in a ditch than to end up in a death camp. The hinterland of that is Lithuania, where I was last week talking to colleagues, and through Belarus and the Ukraine. And it's really important that we ensure that we register where those death sites are.
And I think certainly, and I'm going to sit down next to speak, which hopefully won't be too long away. I think we'd be very happy to keep updates on how that project is going, because it's so important. People do need to be aware of it. Looking to the future, though, I imagine it could be actually very content and happy. The former Prime Minister, friend and colleague David Cameron just released his book, and you quite unscathed from it.
I can't. He was very nice about it. I even bought the audio version because he was reading it, and he obviously, but there was a fair bit of affection, and I'm rather glad they left out 1 or 2 of the other embarrassing things.
Maybe another time.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's important, I think, and I'm conscious of the time, but I think it's important that today people have become so perhaps caught up in what's happening in this country regarding Brexit. Looking to the future, what would you say that it's a positive thing that this country has to look forward to?
Well, we're a large trading nation. We're a large economy. We're a liberal democracy, and it would be good to get through Brexit over the coming years, and it would be good to start to look at some of the social issues that we need to tackle. Those have been left behind by our economic progress, and it will be good to see some solid investment in this country, both in terms of its infrastructure but also in terms of the way it operates as a democracy.
And I know that's going to be a huge focus of the next review. Well, Pickles, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
As always, it's been a pleasure interviewing and learning from our guests. I hope you all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm off to the Old Star to raise a glass to raising standards. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, YouTube and Spotify. The views expressed by each guest in the podcast are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the Parliamentary Review, Westminster Publications, Lord Pickles, Lord Blunkett, David Curry or any other guest on the podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.